in the calendar, uh, a legendary soul that keeps coming back into Am Yisrael. What's the connection? So that's kind of the big frame, and each week we're going to take a part of the, I like to think of it as spiritual history of the idea, because the Torah isn't a historical document, but it does lay out for us historical events that are markers along a spiritual evolution. It's not a physical evolution. Sit on itself and, turn left and right. Concept, the Mashiach, that already, the idea of a Messiah in Judaism sparked controversy. Is it a person? Is it a spirit? Is it a period of time? Is it a soul of a human being, or is it a godly soul in a human being? These questions, each one could probably be set the playing field, what we're dealing with here. It's a concept that arouses tremendous feeling in the world, and obviously not by just Jews. And it's a concept that we have been given pieces of teachings that are scattered all over our literature. And it seems like my experience has been that anybody who's teaching about Mashiach has an angle, as they say, to begin with. And the angle is not necessarily, I'm not listening to classes to get angles from rabbis. I'm trying to get information and process it and learn, the final word is our own heart, where the ideas take us. Okay. So in my little bit of research, the first thing I wanted to bring down from Talmud Yerushalmi Brachot is this idea that the day of the destruction of the temple was the birthday of the Mashiach, of the Messiah. Here's his birthday. Wait a minute. Didn't he already exist? Wasn't Moses anointed? Wasn't Moses doing everything that Mashiach had to do except get in the land and build the temple? Okay, so up until the point that Moses died on Har Niveau, and he didn't get in the land, he couldn't build the temple. So the label moves off. He's no longer Mashiach. He was the Mashiach, what we say, of his generation. But when we look at the concept, we see that knew that he was from the line of the Messianic dynasty. Obviously, he was here. But in the end, he got involved with the occult in a dangerous way. Now, the commentators on that are very interesting. The Leshem, who was a very holy Kabbalist from about 100 years ago, he categorized Solomon as one of the people that tried to get to the bottom of evil and solve it and fix it to the root of evil. And he says that King Solomon tried to do that, and he failed, because we're told in the Midrash that he had dealings with the demons, and one of them tricked him and threw him out of his body into another realm, and he took on King Shlomo's visage on the throne. So the concept there, again, dead ends before the building. Now, even though Shlomo did build the Beit HaMikdash, he did bring world peace. He did not gather in exiles. Now, you could say, well, wait, what exiles were there in the times of the first temple? Certainly nothing like that preceded the second temple. However, he didn't get the job. Moses got the job, but he couldn't get in the land because he struck the rock, and we're told because he got angry, he struck the rock angry then. Either. But okay. So this idea of a person that comes and saves the people is as this planet, as this race, that there's God to come along and save us. And it's not a Jewish-centric idea. It's available in just about any religion that you want. In terms of its or its certainty, because it is one of the precepts of the 13 principles of faith of the Rambam. So I don't want to get in an argument with the Rambam. I'm not qualified to argue with the Rambam. I'm not qualified to be in the same city as the Rambam. The Rambam is such an example of what a person can be on every level of his life. And certainly as a scholar and the man of his Mashiach, concept of faith that we have, that he's going to come, he's going to redeem the people. How we're going to try to keep it narrowed down more to the history and how it appears. And so this idea of birthplace, birthday of Mashiach, do we take that literal or figurative? Is it that when the second temple was destroyed, the Mashiach was born, as it says in the Talmud? Well, a lot of people like the figurative because it doesn't lock you down into an idea. The idea of a figurative Mashiach gives room for interpretation and lets me go home comfortable and not put me on edge. Oh, Mashiach's coming, I better sell my business and go and move to Israel. Or I better do tshuva and get rid of my problems, or whatever it might be that bothers us. When we go figurative in our interpretation, we don't treat it as an actual person. We don't treat it as a prophecy of the highest degree of expectation. Now, when we go literal, we do. We switch it right around. No, there's a man. He's going to come. He's going to do the work. He's going to ingather the exiles. He's going to create world peace. He's going to build the temple, and everybody's going to get along, which just seems like just too high an order for any human being. I don't think it's too high an order for God, but how he's going to do it, it might be a 200, 300, 500-year process. If the way God works nice and slow, gives everybody free choice and everybody a chance to come down to this planet and do their thing and try to contribute to the evolution of this race, you can see it going on for hundreds of years. The Zohar comes along and says, no, the Messianic era is 2,000 years long. So let's just break all the lenses and all the telescopes and microscopes and say it's 2,000-year long period, the whole idea of redemption period. I don't know, I'm supposed to access that. Maybe I need to push a button over here like chat. Oh, look at that. Isn't the trufa comes before the Makkah? Here the birthday of Mashiach did come. That is one of the answers. You pulled it right out of the sky. One of the reasons, or the ideas that the rabbis give, for Hashem always brings the medicine onto the scene before he brings the illness. Of course, the illness is a very big illness. We talk about the destruction of Jewish society in Israel in the year 70 after the Common Era. And what's left is really hard to say because, as everyone knows, when there's a disaster, part of the disaster is what happens after the disaster. When there's no food, and there's no water, and there's disease, and there's all kinds of, shall we say, not Torah behavior. So, but I tend to try to include figurative and literal aspects. I think that both are true. I think the rabbis do speak in hyperbole sometimes. I do think they speak in ways that are designed to force us out of our own comfortable position on things, to make us think outside our own preconceptions. Because the problem with preconceptions is once you have one, you can't receive new ideas that will expand your knowledge. All right. So I like to try to use both ideas, somewhat figurative and literal. We're speaking about this birthday. But I think Sarah's point is well taken, that always in Jewish history, The solution was on hand before the plague. We have the example, of course, of the Inquisition in Spain, that the day that Columbus founded America, which I'm not exactly what that looked like, except for a bunch of pirates getting off their boat and going onto the beach and taking a long draft of deep red wine. But the 1492, of course, was the year that the Inquisition also began. Now, that Inquisition didn't last 4 years like the Holocaust, or 5 years, or maybe you could count it 6, depends on how you date the Holocaust. It lasted 300 years that the Catholic Church and the Catholics of Spain, because there's, of course, the Vatican, and there's the Spanish seat of the Catholic religion, as a religio-political relationship. And they were all down for the Inquisition, which, of course, always means first, steal from the Jews, second, exile them, third, kill them. So here Columbus is already, and most of his crew were Jews. And Columbus, we know, was an Italian Jew from Genoa. And he had a vision that maybe I can create a space in the West Indies that will become the new haven for the Jews to run to. And this is all from a book by a professor from Jamaica at a university over there. It's called The Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't take it 1,000% true, but it sure sounds better than any other story I've heard about Columbus. And there's a lot of evidence for it. It's a good read, too. Now, so Columbus even considered himself like the Mashiach of his generation. We go on to all the different false messiahs, and there were a lot of them, at different levels. We have the famous Shabbatai Tzvi Yamach Shemo. We have the famous Jacob Frank Yamach Shemo. We have the great Rabbi Avraham Abulafia went to Vatican to, he just had a small idea, convert the Pope. Now, if you want to make enemies, that's a great way to start. Enemies, and a death decree was immediately put on his life, and the next day that Pope died. So God had a big blank. Was he a false messiah? I don't think so. It is raised in certain Kabbalistic books about the nature of his personality. Why would any sage of true wisdom and understanding try to convert the number one Catholic? Well, maybe if you could get him to convert, it would be a cascade effect, and all the Catholics, and then have a messianic agenda in place. Well, I believe that Rabbi Abulafia was swing of his powers before the Zohar was discovered and published, which is a big, because the Zohar is full of with Zohar in it, because the Zohar is going to explain to you one of the ideas that we just had. It's a 2,000-year period. Why was going to die any day soon anyways, to get him to be Jewish popes, but they were usually children that escaped the various traumas, and then they were raised by Catholics, and they were so brilliant that they became a cardinal or a bishop and eventually the Pope. And there's talk about some of them in our generation. I don't want to go there. I'm not expert in that. But I know that it is not an uncommon idea that Jewish children did become very high up in the Catholic religion. But nonetheless, keeping to our topic, this idea of the medicine before the illness. In the streets of Jerusalem, for famine, for people eating their children, for all the horrible things that happened when the Romans, tightened the knot on Jerusalem and burned the temple. And they didn't burn just the temple; they burned whatever they wanted. How is the Messiah a medicine for that? For the people there, I'm not sure. It could be. But for people that followed, I think the simplest understanding would be the idea of hope. That we have this belief that is older than the sea, and it is telling us that we will be redeemed one day. and it will be real, and it will be practical, and it will be extant in our world, and it's not a fairy tale for the world to come. Would that heal the exile? I don't know. The exile I went through was from like, conservative Jewish boy in Orlando that buys a van and hits the road and ends in Kabbalist yeshiva in Jerusalem. Now, everybody has a story. That's something. Where have we been redeemed? I believe anybody on Web Yeshiva on a Thursday night has some spark of redemption in them, or they were here to listen to a class like this. It's something has been driving all of us to get there, to find the answer to our pain, and if you want to link that pain and suffering of the existential pain of living in 2023, when you see the nations collapsing and empires folding and chaos descending in every direction, well, we could link it all the way back to the destruction of Jerusalem, because we know that when the temple existed, we're told by the sages that the goyim, the nations, would appreciate the temple more than the Jews if they knew what they got from it, because the korbanot in the temple every day weren't just for the Jews. They were to remove sin over and over, to return the world to the right place, to create world stability for a time. Now, so when we think about the let's take a step backwards. Let's go to the beginning of the story. Baruch Elohim merchevet al pnei hamayim. I've said this verse many times. Many of you must have heard it. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz v'ha'aretz ha'tov v'ruach Elohim merchevet al pnei hamayim. Right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And there was darkness and chaos on the face of the void. And the Spirit of God hovered above the waters. Rashi, the great Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, in Provence, if you pardon my French accent, just to sound right if you say Provence. What's Provence? That's the produce they throw out at the market. In, I think that's southern France. He was a vintner. He was famous for his winemaking, and he is considered the greatest of the Parshanim, the commentators in the Torah for 2,000 years. And he writes that the Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God hovering, is the Spirit, the Ruach of Mashiach. Now that's in the beginning of the story, before there was anything human, before there was anything physical, before there was even a garden. There was a spirit. Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God. So, we can make a very quick contraction and say, if Rashi calls it the Ruach of Mashiach, and Chumash calls it the Spirit of God, then the Spirit of God is the Ruach of Mashiach. It's the same thing. It's not contained in a human container. It's a spirit much bigger than any individual, much bigger than 6 million individuals. It's Elohim, God the judge. That's one of the vessels he inhabits this world. Why? Because he needs to judge. He created a world of free choice, and he knew that he's going to have to play judge once in a while. He's going to be El, the Almighty of kindness, of Abraham. And sometimes he's going to be called the Shaddai, the great limiter, the great boundary setter of creation. So Elohim is already a God-created concept that he uses to shape himself for us. Because remember, he's beyond shape, beyond size, beyond space, beyond anything that we can conceive of. But when he puts it, the Spirit of Elohim, I don't know about Judge Judy or these other TV judges. I've met some good judges, and I think they're pretty sharp people, and I think they understand the importance of their job, and they have to be objective. Does that mean there are corrupt judges? Of course there are. That's not the point. But the idea of judging is a very powerful thing because we are human beings. We're not gods. We don't have the database. We don't have the rahmanut, the mercy, and the empathy to be a truly godly judge. However, that spirit from the beginning hovered on the water, and Rashi goes on, and others tell us that water is the Torah. So they're really telling you, if you want the spirit of God, you got to hover over the Torah. Hover over it, like one of those those little four propeller vehicles, right? Rachfan. I guess bees hover too, right? Anyway, so if we can just turn ourselves into little bumblebees and hover over the Torah, we're going to be in good shape. We're going to absorb some of that Ruach Elohim. We jump 4,000, no more, 5,400 years forward, and we have the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shner Zalman of Liadi, the first Rebbe of Chabad, tells us, no, the spark of Mashiach in every Jew is very simple. That spark is the willingness to die for God. Mesirat nefesh for God. And certainly you see that alive and well in the hundreds of thousands of how many, I don't know, 7, 8, 10,000 Chabad houses in the world, whatever there are, giving themselves over for that idea. So there's self-sacrifice, new definition of Ruach Mashiach. Self-sacrifice. Now we can all relate to that. Every parent self-sacrifices. Every teacher self-sacrifices. The level of purity of the sacrifice, of course, depends on who we are and our backstory and our submerged agendas. Sometimes they're not too submerged. But okay, so now we come back. We've got a new love. It's the spirit of self-sacrifice. Now, wait a minute. Let's go deeper. We have this temple. It's destroyed. It's the glory of the world. We have Jerusalem, the glorious, with everything that goes with that. And out of there is born the spirit of self-sacrifice. But I guess, you know what? That makes perfect sense. When your whole world is destroyed, every move you make is going to become self-sacrifice. To get up in the morning to find breakfast for your family is huge self-sacrifice. To protect yourself from marauders, to protect yourself from the blazing sun of the Middle East. Remember, it all happened in August. And, well, I guess they didn't have August then. August was was named after Augustine. Av, I believe, is the month that we're talking about coming up soon. So you see, wait a minute, maybe we could glimpse a little bit of God's reasoning and logic. God hates hatred, but he certainly hates it's all God. What can you hate when you even understand that the judgment and the negativity and the pain and the suffering? We're told, Ho'avei Hashem sinu ra. King Solomon said that a while back. It's good. Is that love of God? No. King Solomon said, God in goodness so much. Now, who amongst us can talk that way? I'm not sure. King Solomon certainly can. But it's a very good paradigm, a measurement, a tool to see where our love of God is really holding. How much do I love God? Well, sometimes I discover I love myself more. And then 2 minutes later, the ego comes back for another round and another round. It's a lot more than 15 rounds in Manila, I saw some little piece on that story. But, okay, again, at least we've come down to a clearer understanding of this messianic spark. Rabbi Nachman teaches in Likutei Moharan another idea, that I'm willing to sacrifice for God. And that's the halacha, by the way. That we are not obligated to die for God unless the goyim trying to take away our religion. If the goyim come into town and they just rob your hardware store, put a gun to your, God forbid, anybody should never know from these things. But they're just hoodlums trying to rob a store. You're not obligated to die for Torah for that, for Judaism for that. But if they come in and say, I want you to eat pig right now, I want you to, and their agenda is to destroy Judaism, then we are obligated to die for the smallest sin. So you see how the rabbis link it not to the severity of the sin. They link it to the severity of the historical moment for the survival of Judaism. And because the rabbis are also very smart, they see forward about generation, and the next generation is going to hear about it, and we're going to be inspired by their self-sacrifice. And I know when I first heard the story of Rabbi Akiva and how they killed him, I'd already seen a few things, and I understood. I don't know what a Jew is. I don't know what self-sacrifice is. I don't know what love of God is. Here's this man, the great sage, 120 years old, world famous. He goes in delegations to speak to Caesar face to face, and all the other things that Rabbi Akiva did, and they're raking his flesh with hot forks. That's self-sacrifice. Because he had a chance to stop them. The students, his own students were there when it happened, and they said, Rebbe, say a word. Now, so when a rabbi says say a word, they mean use a divine name to cancel the project. And these rabbis had that power. And up into our generation, there are rabbis that have that kind of power, where they say a certain divine names that will cancel the power of the other side, and they walk away. There's a famous story about the Rashash in the 1700s in the old city. They were hoodlums doing horrible things to the people, and they came and they didn't know that Rabbi Shalom Yedidia Sharabi was the greatest makubal of his generation, and they tried to attack him, and he said a word, and they suddenly were frozen in place on the streets of the old city in the Arab Quarter, I believe, and he just left them there. And all the families came out and saw it, and they started screaming and howling and on their hands and knees before the rabbi, begging him to free their poor son who decided they wanted to mug a rabbi. And of course, in the end, he did free him, but not without exacting a few promises about the good treatment of the Jews. And so these stories are not just, after, a one or two or three or four you could believe are a legend, but when you see that there's hundreds of stories over thousands of years, you start to wonder, maybe this stuff is true. Maybe I got to open up my mind to the mystical reality behind the physical. So anyways, so when we see cases of the self-sacrifice of Rabbi Akiva believed that Bar Kokhba was the messianic soul. He had the spirit. What happened? The rabbis were unhappy with Rabbi Akiva because they did not believe, and the truth came to be that Bar Kokhba was not the Messiah. He was not the man to overthrow the Roman Empire in Eretz Israel, to redeem the people. Thousands of people understand that it was the head of the action. He was still think that the wrong person is Messiah. Well, if he thought the wrong guy was Messiah, then who am I to start predicting who? Now, along 35 years ago, a lot of people thought that the Lubavitch would be the Messiah. Certainly a lot of Lubavitchers did. And I was not a Lubavitcher, but I did learn by people who were, and my family connected very deeply to the Chabad movement. I met the Rebbe face to face several times and received his blessing. And I saw, this is not a normal man. You walk in the room, the whole room is filled with electric light. You understand why in Kabbalah there's a level called chashmal. Chashmal is the modern Hebrew for electricity. In Kabbalah, the chashmal is the combination of good and evil that's bound together in what's called klipat noga, the glowing shell. It's where darkness and light are forced together. That's where we live, by the way. This entire realm is called, if we haven't done the work to purify that chashmal. So you felt that by the Rebbe, and you saw the work, you saw the global effect and the expense, and how he prophesied outright about the Six Day War, and many other big events in the history of that time. But he still didn't become a Yah. So we're not here to predict. And if you are, be careful. You will be censored. You will lose your membership card to the web yeshiva. No, but as a psychologist in Jerusalem, I think I've dealt with at least 6 wannabe messiahs. Generally, fairly pleasant people. Sometimes they're really hard to deal with, but I try to work with them, and I try to teach them some of the ideas we're looking at tonight. That you can be the spark, but you gotta wait till the fire gets a little bigger. Don't let the spark get out of control, so you got a fire that you can't put out. And that's what happens in the soul when a person takes on this identity issue, because we all have a part of it. And some people get it through self-sacrifice in Torah, and some people get it through self-sacrifice in being the child of abusive parents. Some people get that spirit of self-sacrifice because their nature is to be an activist, and they want to give themselves to something bigger than themselves, which is a wonderful thing. Someone asked Avraham Shira about the self-sacrifice of activists who took on cause. And the Rebbe said, better an activist no lishma than no activist. Activists do good things. Are they lishma? Well, not too many people are actually reaching that level of doing everything for the sake of heaven. So if they put something in the pocket on the side, that's between them and God. However, we are not here to judge anybody. We're here to look at a concept. And the birthday of the Mashiach is this day of tragedy. And where do we see that concept? We learned that long before I learned Judaism. We had the idea of this phoenix, right? The mythical bird from Greek mythology. The bird that rises from its own ashes. Okay, it's kind of a nice idea. It's obviously it's a metaphor to teach us of an idea. Too low. If anybody would like to chat, please open up your. Are you talking, Sarah? We're not hearing you.
Somebody's mic is open. Somebody else's mic is open.
Everybody check your microphone, please. Hello? Well, I don't know who it is. I don't see any new names up there.
If you look at the participants, you'll see there's somebody who is not yet.
Maybe it's Isaac? Hi, Isaac. Isaac, I think your mic is open. Thank you. Well, we're happy to hear from you, Isaac, but the background discussion, it doesn't sound like it's in sync with us. Okay. Now, at the moment of Rabbi Akiva's death and self-sacrifice, he was smiling, and his students didn't understand that either. And he answered, shouldn't I smile when I'm finally achieving what I wanted to achieve my entire life? I wanted to give my life to Hashem. Now I'm doing it at the ultimate level possible. And so that put a smile on his face, even though, and stuff it inside his clothes, and that were soaked with water. And then they light them on fire so they would burn real slow. So, masochism is, and sadism, it was alive and well back in those days, I'm sure. All right. How are we doing on time? That is. Okay, we've got about 19 minutes. If you want to be Miduyak. I think it's a good time to stop and do a meditation about this idea of this spark of the greatest concept of all being readily available to every human being any moment. I mean, Nachman even says when a person achieves sexual purity, he inherits a spirit of the Messiah as well. So that's an interesting take. It would require a whole class, I'm sure, to open up that Torah where he says those things. But the spark is there. So let's take one moment, and then we'll come back and we'll do a meditation.